So this video was meant to be up at least by 6 p.m. today, but I'm shooting it again this evening due to unforeseen circumstances. So bear with me here. Listen, there's something I want us to talk about, and I think it's becoming quite prevalent, and I think it needs to be addressed. Obviously, it's coming from the DMs that I get. I get DMs all the time. That's not a problem. But then there's this particular DM that's starting to repeat itself, and that is people asking, Yolanda, knowing what you know now about marriages, would you say it is a good idea in this day and age for us to get married as the young people of this generation? Because now I am discouraged. I think the most disheartening thing about this is the fact that the content that we're sharing is actually discouraging some people from getting married because they are scared of the consequences that they see. Obviously, everything that we touch on, every time we get to the aspect of marriage, it seems like the problems are exacerbated when you are in a marriage, right? And so a lot of people nowadays are looking at things like it's not a good idea to get married. You know, the problem is the marriages. But here's my answer to them in most instances, and it's going to also apply to you as well. And I'm hoping that you're going to use it and learn from it. Listen, marriage will always be a good idea. I don't think there's a time when marriage will not be a good idea. First and foremost, it gives you companionship that most of us desire. Number two, it helps people to raise family in a much more stable environment. And that's something that's desired by most people again. And they always say two heads are better than one. So is it not better to have a life partner to do this life situation rather than doing it on your own? So for me, marriage will always be a good thing. Not to say that if you do not wish to marry, you should marry by force. No, some people don't just want to get married just for other reasons, or they just prefer being single. But if you had the desire to marry, let not the information we share here discourage you, but rather I want you to learn from it. You haven't gotten married. There are people who are married. They can't turn the heads of time. They cannot change their decisions, right? It's already too late. But you have not entered. The information then should help you make better choices. Maybe decide on a different type of marital regime that's going to work for you. Maybe make sure that you look into certain things, right? But do not be discouraged. In actual fact, this is what I want to tell you in this video. In most instances, one of the things that I've noted, the issue here is not marriage. The reason why most people find themselves in terrible situations, impoverished, right? Finding themselves in situations that make them lose things that they've worked for is not necessarily marriage itself. But there's three things that contribute to some of the consequences that people face. When I say consequences that people face, what do I mean? I'm just going to give you a few. Right. So some people, after losing a spouse that they were married to, find themselves in an impoverished state of affairs because they were married to somebody. You'll understand why. Some people find themselves having to pay maintenance for children that they know nothing about, children that were possibly created during the marriage with other people. And that happens why? Because they are married to their spouse, possibly in community of property. The other form of consequence you'll see that people face who are married in community of property is them losing assets, being attached by creditors for debts that they know nothing about, actions of the other spouse. So these are the different types of consequences that I'm talking about that people attribute to marriage. And I say don't attribute it only to marriage. In actual fact, I see other things as the problem more than the marriage itself. What are those things? Well, before I talk about those, listen, if you're new here, my name is Yolanda Nyengaza. I'm an attorney by profession. I practice here in Johannesburg, South Africa. It's good to have you here if you're here for the very first time. Listen, if you're coming back here, I don't know, for the 10th time, doesn't matter how many times you've been here, I'm certain if you find this video useful, you're also going to do some justice to it and share it, right? Let's get to the topic. So, like I said, people are saying marriage is a problem. It's not worth it. We find ourselves in these complicated situations with these complex scenarios all because we decided to get married. And I say the marriage is not the problem. But the problem, one, is the person that you're married to. Are the people in the back here? Can you hear me? It is the person that you're married to that is the problem. Why do I say this? Remember, when you're married to someone, in particular in community or property, their actions affect you. What they do affects you and this joint estate. Now, what do these people often do, the ones that you're married to? One, they act without thinking about the fact that their action will affect you. I.e., a person takes out debt out of the blue and in numerous amounts, and you're not aware of it. The next thing, they pass away. The next thing, you have to now cover for those debts you knew nothing about. What's even worse is that they don't even have protection insurance on those debts. The next thing, what do the creditors do? They look at you and say, you are part of that joint estate, and therefore we want you to cough up our money. Problem. Because now you are faced with something you never thought about because of the actions of the other spouse. Second type of action, that your spouse will also find or put themselves in, that will also negatively affect you, is your spouse deciding to make more children without you knowing about it, yet married to them. The next thing, they pass away without having their affairs in order, without doing anything to ensure that the interests of those children are protected. The next thing, you are now faced with a situation where you are told you need to share everything that you have built, with or without your spouse who has passed away, with the very same children they created in the marriage. Do you see what their actions are doing to you? They are affecting you. So the issue, is it really the marriage? For me, it doesn't seem like it. Here, the issue is the person, because they decided to act in a manner that compromises your own peace, your finances, your emotional well-being, and otherwise. See why I say in this instance, I don't blame the marriage? Also, you have a spouse. They run a business. They embark on so many things. They take risks, and they forget that unfortunately some of their actions in that business might come back to bite you. The next thing, the creditors are pursuing you, saying that business has gone down. We still want our money. And you, because you're the spouse of that one who decided to stand as surety in his business, we're coming to collect, and you better make a plan because you are part of that joint estate. Do you see what's happening here? Who's the problem? Is it the marriage? Is it the marriage? Let's go to the second thing that I say attribute the fault to more than the marriage. And then the second thing that I say, and then the second thing that I say also is a problem more than the marriage itself, is us not knowing or understanding the law. Sometimes when people act, even though they are married and they know they are married to you in community or property, at times they are not aware that their actions will affect you to that extent as your spouse. For example, I've heard people say, who are married in community or property with kids, now I'm going to run up a very huge debt. Either way, when I pass away, they're going to wipe out that debt. Only if they knew. only if they knew that the debt is going to come to you as the other spouse because you are part of that joint estate. So sometimes it's the fact that they're acting in a certain manner, not knowing that it's going to also affect you. They're thinking, no, no, no. As much as I'm married, I'm an individual. My actions will affect me. But then they forget that they are attached to you. You are attached to them. What they do affects you. What you do affects them. It's the same when people decide they're going to marry. I mean, they're going to have more children, etc. Out of the marriage, the next thing you end up paying for maintenance for children that you know nothing about because now they cannot, afford to take care of those kids. The next thing, it affects you. Then they get shocked when they see summons of them written there, but also you also being there, and they're not understanding. It is because of their actions that you're now in the situation that you're in. So now what do we do? Do we blame the marriage itself, or do we blame the lack of knowledge? Because they were not aware that their actions could place you in the situation. And you probably also were not aware of certain things legally, i.e., you were not aware that getting married in community of property has such implications. You didn't know. You did not know that you had a choice. You could choose between 3 types of marital regimes. You did not know the consequences of each of those regimes. Had you known, you probably would have made a better decision. So what do we say? Is it the marriage that's the issue? Or is it us not knowing these types of marriages before we entered into this marriage? Because had we known, maybe we would have made a better choice in terms of the type of marriage we would have entered into. So maybe we would not be blaming the marriage itself. You see why I'm saying the problem, according to me, is not necessarily the marriage, but now here it is the lack of knowledge of the law and where it stands and how it affects you when you enter into a certain type of marriage. Let's go to the third and final thing. And then the last thing that I say is also an issue that we should look at or fault more than the marriage itself, as is the fact that we can be a bit ignorant and we have a lot of expectations of the law and we expect it to be linear and favor us as married people, right? So what tends to happen is that, for example, when you talk to people about some of the problems that they're in, i.e. there's a child that probably has to claim from a deceased estate and the parent happens to be the spouse of the surviving person that you're talking to now, people often want to, or expect the law to be on their side. You'll see even the story, how it goes is, I was married to the person, faithful, building with this person. Now all of a sudden I need to give this person, that child, this and that, whereas I was in a marriage with this person. How is that even a possibility? Now I need to share certain things. I need to cough up money to give to these other people. How does it work? One thing that people don't understand is that the law is not as linear as they expect it to be, right? It tries to play a fair role, meaning that even if it's going to now end up favoring other people or putting certain people on an equal wavelength, that's something that people are not looking forward to, because they're expecting that the law is going to protect their interests as people who are married, and understandably so. If you're married to someone, you're raising a family with them, if they happen to die, you would expect that if you met them without any additional children, you and your family would get the best benefit. But unfortunately, if they happened to create more additional responsibilities out there, i.e. children, those children also need to get something, right? And it's unfortunate. You know what happens? Because people have this expectation that the law is going to protect their interests as people who are married, at times people make decisions on the basis of this understanding. A lot of people don't plan their estates, right? And they often say, no, it's not a problem. I know if something happens to me, my wife and children or my husband and children will get everything. But then they forget that they also have other children out of wedlock, right? And those interests of those children also have to be protected. So the calmness that people have sometimes is a bit scary because they don't know that it's going to bring a lot of complications should something happen to them. because they also have other people who are blood related to them and who are going to have to be considered if something happens to them. I.e., also sometimes people expect that, because they're probably in this marital relationship, um, things are going to happen in a certain way. If they pass away, life will go on for the spouse and children in a certain way. They're not going to be affected by what they have done and their actions, etc. Now, because of this understanding, again, people do not plan or do things properly. Other people will say, "I'm going to run up a certain debt. I know when something happens to me, my spouse will be okay because that was my debt. It was my situation." It's not your situation. You are married. You are attached to somebody else, right? So sometimes the ignorance and the way or we expect the law to work and that it must favor us is also to our detriment and is the reason why we tend to suffer the consequences that we do. Guys, we could go on and on and on about this particular topic, but I'm going to stick to these three that I say we should really look at as faults more than the marriage itself, because if we can remove all of these, the marriages we're in will be much more enjoyable. I.e., if, for example, we now were to gain more knowledge and understanding about marriages before entering into them, the different types of marital regimes, would make better choices as to the type of marriages we enter into, minimizing the amount of problems we'll see in the future. Secondly, if we choose the right type of partners who are well aware and healthy in mind and in their decision making, we're not going to find ourselves in these situations because we would have married people who are considerate enough and understand that they should behave in a certain manner to ensure that the interests of their families are protected. And thirdly, if instead of having expectations, we again, we plan our affairs, we put in information in our minds that is actually accurate, we're going to make better choices again by making much more better plans, right? And we're not going to find ourselves in these situations. Our families are not going to be in situations that they cannot control, that are very nasty, and that are going to put them under so much stress, because we would have made better choices because we have the right kind of information and we are knowledgeable enough to know how we need to conduct ourselves. So if we put these in motion, we're going to have better marriages. We're going to stop faulting marriage, because the issue, I say, is not the marriage itself. It is these other things that make marriage the bad guy. Marriage is a good thing. Guys, we'll leave it at here. We'll see you next time. If you have anyone that you think should see this video, just share it with them. We share information. We share such engagements. Hopefully, it helps them. It helps you. But either way, we'll talk next time. My name is Yolanda Nyengeza. Again, I'm an attorney by profession practicing in Johannesburg, South Africa. I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.